In this second video, I'm going to talk about the installation of Mongo and using it for the first time. So in this week's lab, you'll find all the steps that you need for installing MongoDB and then testing it. By testing, we mean to create a document and read it back from the database again. So just to kind of confirm everything is working okay. Over the next few weeks, then we'll get into exploring the CRUD functionality of Mongo. So create, read, update, and delete. We will also use Atlas to host our Mongo deployments in the cloud. And we'll look at the aggregation framework, which is used for advanced querying. So the first thing you'll see when you do have Mongo installed, and by the way, the steps for this are in the lab, and I've put a link as well to a couple of guides on installing it for Mac and for Linux as well. But once you have it installed on whatever operating system you're on, you'll see in your bin folder, there's a number of different files in there. And I just want to draw your attention to two of them, MongoD and Mongo.exe. So two different applications here that we're going to make use of. Mongo uses this client-server architecture. So that means that every time you want to use Mongo to do the labs or work on your own assignment database or whatever, you'll need to have both of those processes running. The MongoD one is the database server. So that's the one that listens for requests and takes in requests from the client. There's one server per database, but you could have multiple clients all using the same server and the same database. But in the case of yourselves, obviously, if you're just working on your own machine, you are the one and only client. But yeah, you will need to have this other process running, Mongo.exe, and that's the process that you will use to enter all your commands in and make all the requests to the database server. So I'm actually just going to show you this. When it is running, your MongoD, that's your server, your server window will look something like this. A whole load of commands just to kind of say what's going on. You won't be entering anything into this window. You just get that one running and leave it running there in the background. And then there's another window, Mongo, the regular Mongo client window, and that's where you're going to enter in all your commands. And we'll talk about some of those in a second. Okay, so just to note, I suppose, that you need to have both of those running every time you want to work on your database. And also you should start the MongoD process first each time as well. If you start the Mongo process first, I think it uses the port that the server needs. So make sure you start them in this order, server first and then the client. Right, some useful commands then that are useful when you're working with Mongo. I'll enter some of these here. So show DBs, first of all. This one shows you all of the databases that you have. Everyone, when they start, will have admin, config, and local. And those are the three that are just there by default. Test is one that I've created. Use DB name then is an interesting one. If I say, for example, use test, that's me telling Mongo I want to use the test database, as you might expect. But if I enter in a database name like test2 that isn't already there in the list, it will create that and switch to it at the same time. So this is where you start to see the flexibility of Mongo come into play a bit. Rather than, showing an error to say that there is no test2 database, it assumes that must mean you want to create that database, and so it will create it and use it, switch to using it at the same time. DB is a useful command if you're ever not sure what database you're currently in. DB will show you. And let's see, if I switch back to the regular test database and type DB, you can see now I'm within the test database. And then show collections shows all of the collections within that database. I think I just have one in here called test. Okay. In the previous video, I talked a little bit about the structure of a document. And so we talked there about having all of these different atomic values, but also arrays and documents within a document and so on. To actually insert that document then into the database, we'll use a command called insert. So this is the insert operation. DB will always be there at the start, but this part here, test, is the name of the collection that I want to add it to. So this will add this document into the test collection. Okay, I'm going to switch back here and just start typing this in here. And what I actually want to show you, I'm going to switch to using a text editor in a second, but I just want to show you the reason why it's a great idea to use a text editor to type in your commands, especially for longer ones. So let's say here I missed the T in insert, for example, and just put in the bracket here, and I go on to the next line and start typing away, and I could continue on there. And even if I made another mistake there or whatever and go on to the next line, it actually did throw an error there, but sometimes it won't, like you saw there, it won't actually tell you straight away that there's an error. So you could go through, type in the whole of the rest of that document, and then find out that at the end that you were missing a letter on the first line. When you start typing like this, it doesn't let you go back up and edit that previous line that you were on. So it can be quite annoying to only work in the command prompt window. So for that reason, I suggest working in a text editor. You can use any text editor that you want. So for example, if I was using something like Notepad++, I could type out my whole thing here, and let me actually just make an error here so you can see what I mean. So type out my whole insert statement and then paste that across here. I probably should have gone on to a new line first. Just paste that in again. Okay, and you can see I get the error there, but it's really easy for me to fix the problem because I can just fix it over here in my text editor and paste it in again. And this time it works. When it works successfully, you'll see something like this, and it'll say write results and tell you how many documents it inserted. So 1 is as we expected there. Okay, so for that reason, I recommend using a text editor, but I'm going to show you actually in a second the best one, which is Visual Studio Code, because it lets you run the commands directly in the text editor as well. But first I'm going to just show you this last part here, how we get information back out of the database. So db.test.find will show you all the documents that are in that test collection. And as you can see, I've added this one document 3 times over now at this stage. And you may see that they're reading all of the information from that document is a little bit difficult. So in Mongo, you can also chain a number of functions together. So if I say db.test.find.pretty, it will give me a prettier version or a more readable version of those documents. Okay, and lastly then, like I said, I'll just show you Visual Studio Code. I definitely recommend using this one because it has some great features that make it a lot easier to work with your MongoDB database. So here I've just created a document already, and I have the same values in there. I've saved it as a JavaScript file, so test.js, as you can see there. Because Mongo is so similar to JavaScript files are probably the best one to save your documents as, because you get the nice syntax highlighting and all the rest there. In Mongo then, if you go to Terminal and New Terminal, it opens a terminal down here, and you can type in MongoD to run your Actually, sorry, 1 second. I should probably close these down first. I think just close them here. Yeah, because it probably just won't let me run 2 versions of the MongoDB process at once. Okay, great. So in here, then I can run that MongoDB process again. And as you can see, it looks very similar, but it's just running here within Visual Studio Code. I can then add a second terminal using this plus, or I can use the terminal menu again and run the Mongo process. And then I can, if I wanted, I could type my commands down here, or I could copy and paste them from here down to here. But there's also a very handy other option in terminal. If you go into terminal, highlight the command that you want to run and go to run selected text. Okay, and you can see there again, it's successfully inserted that document. And then, you know, on each lab that you're working on, you could kind of enter all your commands here in one document in Visual Studio Code. I'm going to try this again with the find, for example. And each time you want to run one, just highlight that one and go to run selected text. And you'll get your output down below here. The reason it lets me keep adding that same document over and over, by the way, is because of, like I said in the previous video, how it adds a unique ID to each one. So you can actually add the same document limitless times, and it will just assign a unique ID each time. So I think this is definitely, in my opinion anyway, the most convenient way to work with your code when you're working with MongoDB. Okay, so I think that was everything that I think that was everything I wanted to cover there. One last thing, I suppose, is with this run selected text. I have some steps in the lab there to show you how to make a keyboard shortcut for that as well. So it's easy as it could possibly be, then Control Alt and R to run it each time. Okay, so all those steps are in the lab, but if you run into any problems at any stage, myself, I think I have W2, and for TJ, I think that has W1, we'll be available during the lab to answer any questions that you have, or you can post a question in the Slack workspace at any time. Okay, so best of luck with it, and I'll see you all next week.